the sacred rites of Demeter and Persephone. Hello and welcome back to Driftwood Histories. Tonight, our journey takes us back to the sun-drenched hills and fragrant fields of ancient Greece. We are not walking the battlefields of Sparta, nor the political agora of Athens. We are joining a sacred procession, walking a path trod by philosophers, emperors, and common folk for nearly 2,000 years. We are seeking initiation into the most famous, most revered, and most fiercely guarded secret ritual of the ancient world. For centuries, in the small town of Eleusis, a mystery was performed that promised its followers something more precious than gold or power: a blessed afterlife, and a life free from the terror of death. These were the Eleusinian mysteries. What really happened inside the darkened, sacred hall? What did the initiates see that changed their lives forever? And how was a secret of such magnitude kept so successfully for so long? So, find your comfortable place. Let the clamor of our modern world fall away. Close your eyes, and allow my voice to be your guide as we follow the holy road from Athens to Eleusis, to explore the myth, the ritual, and the profound, life-altering secret of the rites of the goddess Demeter. Our story begins, as it must, not with a philosophical treatise, but with a mother's grief, a stolen daughter, and a world plunged into winter. At the heart of every great mystery school, there lies a foundational myth, a sacred story that is not just a tale to be told around a fire, but a key that unlocks the door to its secret teachings and its profound emotional power. For the Eleusinian mysteries, that key was the elemental and deeply human story of a mother's love, a daughter's loss, and a grief so powerful it could bring the entire world to its knees. This is the sacred drama of Demeter, the great Olympian goddess of the harvest, of the fertile earth, and of the sacred laws of existence, and her beloved daughter, Persephone, the beautiful maiden of spring, whom she called Kore, which simply means the maiden. The story, most beautifully and completely told in the great Homeric hymn to Demeter, which dates back to the 7th century BC, begins in a sun-drenched, idyllic meadow, a place called Nyssa, a location so mythic it cannot be found on any map. Persephone, the personification of spring itself, is gathering flowers, roses, crocuses, fragrant violets, and irises with her companions, the graceful, sea-born daughters of Oceanus. The world is in a state of perfect, youthful harmony. Suddenly, she spies a flower of astonishing, almost supernatural beauty. It is a narcissus, a lure placed there by the earth goddess Gaia, at the secret behest of Zeus, the king of the gods himself. It was a plant, the hymn tells us, from which 100 blossoms grew, and its fragrance was so sweet that the whole of the heavens and the earth and the salty swell of the sea smiled. As Persephone, in a moment of pure, innocent delight, reaches out with both hands to pluck the wondrous flower, the earth itself splits open with a deafening roar. From the dark, gaping chasm emerges Hades, the grim, unseen, and powerful lord of the underworld, in his golden chariot drawn by black, immortal horses. He is the brother of Zeus, the ruler of the dead, and he has long desired Persephone for his queen. He seizes the screaming young goddess, places her in his chariot, and descends, against her will, into his dark, subterranean kingdom of shades and silence. Demeter, her heart pierced with a mother's grief, hears her daughter's faint, echoing cry as she is dragged away. In a panic, she tears the beautiful veil from her head, throws off her dark cloak, and begins a frantic 9-day search across the face of the earth. She is like a lioness searching for her lost cub. She carries 2 blazing torches, one in each hand, and she does not stop to eat the divine ambrosia, nor to drink the sweet nectar of the gods, nor to bathe her body. She simply searches, her sorrow a moving shadow across the land. Her grief is so immense, so cosmic in its scope, that she, the goddess of the harvest, neglects her sacred duties. The crops on earth cease to grow. The seeds that farmers sow will not sprout in the soil. The plows of men cut through barren, dusty fields, and humanity, deprived of its sustenance, faces the slow, creeping horror of a worldwide famine. The world itself begins to wither and die, mirroring the goddess's own sorrow. Finally, on the 10th day of her search, she encounters Hecate, the mysterious goddess of witchcraft and crossroads, who carries a torch of her own. Hecate tells Demeter that she, too, heard Persephone's cry, but did not see who had taken her. Together, the 2 goddesses go to Helios, the all-seeing sun god, who watches over everything that happens on earth during the day. Helios, taking pity on the grieving mother, tells her the terrible truth. It was her own brother, Zeus, the king of the gods, who had conspired to give their daughter, Persephone, to his brother, Hades, to be his bride. Enraged and heartbroken by this divine betrayal from the highest authority in the cosmos, Demeter withdraws from the company of the gods on Mount Olympus. She will not be placated. She will not be reasoned with. She puts aside her divine form and disguises herself as an old, mortal woman named Doso. She wanders the earth, her sorrow turning the world cold and barren. Her journey eventually brings her to the town of Eleusis, a small kingdom not far from Athens. There, she sits by the Maiden Well, a public well where the women of the town gathered to draw water. She sits on a stone that would come to be known as the Agilastos Petra, the sorrowful rock or the laughless rock. Her head veiled, lost in her profound grief. It is here that she is found by the 4 kind-hearted daughters of King Celeus and Queen Metaneira, the rulers of Eleusis. Taking pity on the old, sorrowful woman, they ask her story. Demeter, still in her disguise, tells them a fabricated tale. She claims she is from Crete and was captured by pirates, but managed to escape. The princesses, moved by her plight and her dignified sorrow, invite her back to the royal palace to be a nurse for their infant brother, the newborn prince, Demophon. At the palace, the queen, Metaneira, offers the old woman a seat of honor, a chair draped with a silver fleece. But Demeter refuses, remaining on a simple stool, still veiled, still silent in her grief. It is only the gentle, and according to some versions, the slightly bawdy and irreverent, jesting of a wise old servant named Iambe that finally coaxes a smile, and then a laugh from the grieving goddess. This moment, the breaking of profound, divine grief with simple human humor, would become a key part of the later rituals at Eleusis. Demeter refuses the offer of red wine, considering it unfitting for her state of mourning. But she accepts a special, sacred drink, a mixture of barley, water, and pennyroyal mint. This drink, the Kykion, would later become the sacred potion of the mysteries, consumed by the initiates themselves before they entered the final, secret rites. She agrees to become the nurse to the infant prince, Demophon. In her love for this mortal child, and perhaps as a way to reclaim a piece of the immortality that was stolen from her own daughter, she attempts a secret, magical ritual. Each night, without the parents' knowledge, she anoints the baby with divine ambrosia, and she holds him in the heart of the great fire, to burn away his mortal frailties and to transform him into an immortal god. But one night, the queen, Metaneira, driven by a mother's curiosity and suspicion, spies on her. Seeing her child in the flames, she screams in terror, believing the old nurse is trying to kill her son. The ritual is interrupted. Demeter, her divine form revealed in a blaze of light and terrifying, divine anger, is furious. She snatches the child from the fire and declares that, because of the mother's foolishness and lack of faith, the boy will now remain mortal. But she also declares that the people of Eleusis must build her a great temple and an altar to win back her favor. They do so, and Demeter sequesters herself within this new temple, refusing all company, allowing the world above to continue to wither and die under the grip of her relentless sorrow. Zeus, seeing that all of humanity will perish if the deadlock is not broken, finally relents. He sends a procession of gods to plead with Demeter, offering her beautiful gifts, but she refuses them all. She will not let the earth bear fruit again until she sees her daughter with her own eyes. Finally, Zeus sends the swift messenger god, Hermes, down to the dark depths of the underworld with an ultimatum. Hades must release Persephone. Hades, knowing he cannot defy the will of the king of the gods, agrees. But he is cunning. Before his queen departs, as she is filled with joy at the prospect of seeing her mother again, he offers her a single, sweet, glistening pomegranate seed. She eats it, perhaps not knowing the full consequences of the act. Having tasted the food of the underworld, she is now forever bound to it. An eternal, cosmic compromise is reached. Persephone will be allowed to return to the world of light, but not forever. She will spend 2/3 of the year on earth with her mother, Demeter. During this time, Demeter rejoices, and she allows the earth to burst forth with life. This is the glorious cycle of spring and summer. But for the remaining 1/3 of the year, Persephone must return to the underworld to sit on the throne beside her husband, Hades. During this time, Demeter grieves anew, and the earth becomes cold and barren. This is the cycle of autumn and winter. Overjoyed at the partial, but permanent, return of her daughter, Demeter restores fertility to the world. And, as a gift of profound gratitude to the people of Eleusis who had sheltered her in her sorrow, she, along with Persephone, taught them her sacred rites, her mysteries. These were the Eleusinian mysteries, a ritual reenactment of her loss, her desperate search, and the joyful, world-saving reunion with her daughter. It was a story that explained the very turning of the seasons, the death and rebirth of the grain, and, most importantly, it offered a powerful and deeply hopeful allegory for the survival of the human soul after the death of the body. It was a promise of light after darkness, of life after death. For nearly 2,000 years, From the Bronze Age glories of the Mycenaean period around 1500 BC until its final suppression in the late 4th century AD, the Eleusinian mysteries were not just a minor cult. They were the spiritual heart of the ancient Greek world. The promise of Eleusis, a blessed afterlife and a life free from the terror of death, was a spiritual magnet of immense power, drawing thousands upon thousands from across the known world, from the shores of the Black Sea to the Pillars of Hercules. Initiation into the mysteries was remarkably and radically democratic, a stark contrast to many of the other exclusive mystery cults of the ancient world. It was open to everyone: men, women, and even slaves, with only two conditions. The first was that they had to speak Greek to understand the sacred words, and the second was that they had to have clean hands, a ritual and moral term meaning they had not committed murder. The stain of shed blood could not be purified and was a bar to entry. To be an initiate, a mysts, was one of the highest and most sought-after honors an individual could achieve in their lifetime. The list of known initiates is a testament to its immense prestige and its profound cultural significance. The great Athenian statesman Pericles, who guided Athens through its golden age, was an initiate. The tragic playwrights Aeschylus and Sophocles, who shaped the very consciousness of Western drama, were initiates. The philosophers Plato and his student Aristotle, whose ideas form the bedrock of Western thought, were both initiated. The Roman orator Cicero wrote with deep reverence of the hope the mysteries provided to mankind. And even powerful Roman emperors, men who were themselves considered gods on earth, such as Augustus, the Philhellene Hadrian, and the great Stoic philosopher King Marcus Aurelius, all made the sacred pilgrimage to Eleusis to be initiated into its secrets. The vow of silence was absolute. The penalty for revealing what occurred during the final secret rites was death, not just by law, but, it was believed, by the direct, divine wrath of the goddesses Demeter and Persephone themselves. The Athenian state took this vow with the utmost seriousness. The playwright Aeschylus was famously put on trial for his life on a charge of impiety, accused of having revealed some of the secrets of the mysteries in one of his plays. He was acquitted, but the trial itself shows how seriously the vow was taken. And this vow was kept with astonishing, almost perfect, success. We have thousands of passing references to the mysteries in ancient literature, hymns, and art, but almost no direct, explicit descriptions of what the initiates saw and felt in the final, climactic moments of the ritual. What we know of the public-facing parts of the festival, however, has been painstakingly pieced together from these fragments, from inscriptions found at the sanctuary, and from the archaeological evidence itself. The full initiation process was divided into two stages, often separated by at least a year, ensuring a long and thoughtful period of preparation. The first stage was the Lesser Mysteries, a preliminary purification ceremony held in the spring, during the month of Anthesterion. It took place in Agri, a suburb of Athens by the Ilissos River. These rites were focused on purification and were likely connected to the myth of Dionysus, who was also a key figure in the Eleusinian pantheon. This was a preparatory rite, a necessary first step on the path to full initiation into the greater mysteries. But the great event, the one that brought Athens to a standstill and drew thousands from across the world, was the Greater Mysteries. It was held every autumn during the month of Bodromion, which corresponds to our late September and early October. The timing was deeply symbolic, coinciding with the autumn sowing of the grain, a time of hope and new beginnings. The festival lasted for 9 full days, a sacred number mirroring the 9 days of Demeter's desperate search for her lost daughter. The journey began in Athens. On the 13th day of the month, the young Athenian men who had been chosen as ephebes, or military cadets, would march to Eleusis. On the 14th day, they would escort the sacred objects of the cult, the Hieria, in a grand, solemn procession from the temple in Eleusis back to Athens. These objects, whose exact nature remains one of the great secrets of the cult, were placed in a sacred chest, the Keist, and were kept in the Eleusinion, a temple at the base of the Athenian Acropolis, for the duration of the Athenian part of the festival. On the 15th day, the festival officially began. The priests and priestesses of the cult, led by the Hierophant High Priest, whose title means he who shows the sacred things, a position held for life by a member of the aristocratic Eumolpidi family, and the Deduchos, the torchbearer, a member of the Charax family, would make a formal proclamation in the Athenian Agora, the public square. They would officially declare the opening of the mysteries and warn away the unworthy, those who did not speak Greek and those whose hands were not clean. The following day, the 16th, was a day of mass purification. The prospective initiates, the Mistai, would gather and march in a great procession to the sea, at Phaleron Bay. The proclamation was made, Halade Mistai, to the sea you initiates. There, they would perform a powerful act of cleansing. They would purify themselves by bathing in the salt water, and each initiate would sacrifice a young piglet, an animal sacred to the chthonic deities of the underworld. They would wash both themselves and the animal in the sea before the sacrifice, a profound ritual of washing away both physical and spiritual impurity. The next few days in Athens were spent in further, more private sacrifices and rituals at the Eleusinion. But the true climax of the public part of the festival began on the morning of the 19th day of the month. This was the grand procession along the sacred way, the Hierahodos. This was one of the great spectacles of the ancient world. Thousands of initiates, crowned with myrtle branches and carrying staffs, known as abachos, bound with ivy, would gather at the gates of Athens. They were led by the priests and priestesses of the cult, who carried the shrouded, secret Hiera back to its home in Eleusis. The procession was a joyous, ecstatic, and often raucous affair. It was a pilgrimage, a party, and a sacred performance all at once. They would dance, and they would sing hymns to Iacchus, a deity associated with Dionysus and the personification of the joyful, ritual cry of the initiates, the Iacch, O Iacch. The procession would stop at various sacred shrines along the way. Most famously, they would perform a ritual of jesting and mockery, known as Jephorismus, as they crossed a bridge over the river Cephisos. Here, masked figures would shout ritual obscenities and personal insults at the passing pilgrims, particularly at prominent citizens. This ritual was thought to honor the servant Iambe, who, according to the myth, had made the grieving Demeter laugh with her crude and irreverent jokes. It was a moment of release, of catharsis, of breaking the normal rules of social decorum before entering the deeply sacred and solemn space of the sanctuary. It was a reminder that even in the most holy of journeys, there is a place for laughter. The great procession would arrive at the sanctuary of Eleusis at night, by the light of thousands of flickering torches, a spectacular and moving sight that would have been visible for miles around. Upon entering the sacred precinct, the initiates, the mystai, would have likely performed ritual dances in the great courtyard, a final act of communal joy and anticipation. They would have undergone a final purification. They would have also been fasting for much of the day, a practice that not only purified the body but also heightened the senses and prepared the mind for the profound spiritual experience to come. And at some point during this night, they would drink the sacred potion, the Kykion, the mixture of barley, water, and pennyroyal mint that Demeter herself had drunk in the house of King Celeus. This drink was a key part of the ritual, the final preparation for the great revelation. And then, after all the public spectacle, after the long, dusty journey, after the fasting and the purification, the initiates were ready. They would finally pass through the great gates of the inner sanctuary and enter the telesterion, the great initiation hall. This was a massive, dimly lit, square, column-filled sanctuary, unlike any other Greek temple. It was not a house for a god statue, to be admired from the outside. It was a theater for the human soul, designed to hold up to 3,000 people at once. And it is here, inside this dark, silent and crowded hall, that the public rites ended, and the great, unutterable secret, the final mystery, was at last revealed. What happened inside the telesterion at Eleusis is the greatest secret of the ancient world. For 2,000 years, thousands upon thousands of initiates, from the philosopher Plato to the emperor Marcus Aurelius, passed through its doors and witnessed the final sacred rites. And for 2,000 years, they kept their solemn vow of silence. The penalty for revealing the secret was death, not just by the laws of Athens, but, it was believed, by the direct, divine wrath of the goddesses Demeter and Persephone themselves. But from the fragments we have from the hymns, from the art, from the critiques of their enemies, and from the awestruck, yet cryptic testimony of the initiated themselves, we can attempt to piece together the profound, life-altering experience that lay at the heart of the mysteries. The final, secret rites, which took place over 2 nights, were known as the epoptia, a Greek word that means the beholding or the seeing. It was not a lesson to be learned, but a vision to be witnessed, a direct, personal experience. The experience involved 3 core elements: the dramina, the things done; the legomena, the things said; and the deichnomena, the things shown. Let us imagine ourselves as an initiate, a mysts. We have walked the sacred way. We have been purified in the sea. We have fasted. We have drunk the sacred Kykion. Now, with hundreds of other seekers, we pass through the great gates of the inner sanctuary and enter the telesterion. The hall is unlike any other Greek temple. It is not long and rectangular, leading to a cult statue. It is a vast, square, hypostyle hall, its roof supported by a forest of 42 columns. It is dark, profoundly dark, and silent. In the center of the hall stands a small, windowless stone building, the Anacteron, which means the palace. This is the Holy of Holies, a place so sacred that only the Hierophant, the high priest of the mysteries, was ever allowed to enter. The initiates would stand or sit on a series of 8 stone steps that ran around the walls of the hall. They would be crowded together in the darkness, their senses heightened by the fasting, by the long journey, and by a profound sense of shared, sacred anticipation. the dramana, the things done, would then begin. This was almost certainly a dramatic, immersive, and powerful reenactment of the sacred myth of Demeter and Persephone. This was not a simple play with actors on a stage. It was a piece of ritual theater designed to elicit a deep emotional and psychological response. The initiates, standing in the darkness, would have been plunged into the drama itself. They would have experienced the terror of Persephone's abduction into the underworld. We can imagine terrifying, disembodied sounds echoing through the vast, dark hall. Perhaps the sound of a great roar, the thunder of Hades' chariot, and the faint, desperate cries of the maiden Persephone. Then, they would have felt the despair of Demeter's frantic, torchlit search. The deduchos, the torchbearer, and other priests would have moved through the darkened hall with blazing torches, their light creating fleeting, terrifying shadows on the walls and columns. The initiates, who had just symbolically completed the same journey on the sacred way, would have been reliving it in a much more intense, more terrifying, and more sacred context. And then, in a stunning, emotionally cathartic climax, they would have witnessed the joyful, world-saving reunion of mother and daughter. The legomena, the things said, were the sacred words, the commentaries and interpretations spoken by the Hierophant, his voice perhaps booming from the unseen enactoron, or echoing through the hall. He would have explained the deeper, allegorical meaning of the drama they were witnessing, linking the story of the goddesses to the life of the human soul, and to the promise of its own rebirth after death. And finally, the diknemena, the things shown, were the climax of the entire experience. At the peak of the ritual, in a moment of absolute, deathly silence, a great fire would have been lit, perhaps on the roof of the enactoron, flooding the hall with a sudden, brilliant and blinding light. In this blaze of glory, the Hierophant would have emerged from the enactoron and held up the sacred objects, the hiera, for all the initiates to see. And the final, most holy, and most secret revelation, according to the later Christian writer Hippolytus, who sought to expose the rite, was a single reaped ear of grain. A single ear of grain. To our modern minds, this seems almost absurdly simple, anticlimactic. But we must try to see it through the eyes of an initiate, a person who had fasted, who had walked the sacred way, who had ritually purified themselves, and who had just experienced the profound emotional catharsis of the divine drama of death and rebirth. For them, this simple object would have been imbued with staggering symbolic power. It represented life, death, and resurrection in its purest, most elemental form. It was the promise of the harvest. It was the physical manifestation of the endless cycle of the seasons. It was the absolute guarantee that even after the death of winter, life would return from the dark earth. It was a direct, tangible vision of eternity. It was the ultimate answer to the terror of death. But many scholars and philosophers, from the ancient Platonists to modern researchers like the classicist Karl Ruck, the mycologist R. Gordon Wasson, and the inventor of LSD himself, Albert Hofmann, believed there was another, more potent and more secret element at play. An element that could explain the profound, life-altering, and ineffable nature of the experience. They argue that the sacred potion the initiates drank, the Kikian, was psychoactive. The official recipe, as we know from the Homeric hymn, was a mix of barley, water, and pennyroyal mint. But Ruck, Wasson, and Hofmann, in their groundbreaking 1978 book The Road to Eleusis, proposed a compelling and controversial theory. They argued that the barley used to make the drink may have been deliberately or accidentally infected with ergot, a fungus that grows on grain. Ergot contains powerful, psychoactive alkaloids, most notably LSA, lysergic acid amide, a chemical cousin of LSD. If the priests of Eleusis knew how to prepare a controlled dose of this potent substance, then the initiates would have undergone a powerful, collective psychedelic journey. They would have experienced a direct, visceral, and truly visionary state of mystical consciousness. This would explain the consistent testimony of the ancient world's greatest minds. It would explain why the experience was considered eriton, unutterable. It was impossible to describe in ordinary words, because it was an experience that transcended ordinary consciousness. The initiates had not just seen a play about a goddess. They had, in a sense, become the goddess. They had experienced a form of ego death, a dissolution of the boundaries of the self, and a profound, ecstatic reunion with the divine, a true spiritual rebirth. The ancient sources are filled with testimony to the power of this experience. The poet Pindar, writing in the 5th century BC, declared, "Blessed is he who, having seen these rites, goes below the hollow earth. For he knows the end of life and he knows its God-sent beginning." The great playwright Sophocles wrote, "Thrice happy are those of mortals, aho, having seen these rites, depart for Hades. For to them alone is it granted to have true life there." And the Roman philosopher and statesman Cicero, himself an initiate, wrote with deep reverence, For it appears to me that among the many exceptional and divine things your Athens has produced and contributed to human life, nothing is better than those mysteries. For by means of them we have been transformed from a rough and savage way of life to a humane and civilized condition. We have learned from them the beginnings of life, and have gained the power not only to live happily, but also to die with a better hope. These are not the words of people who have merely watched a play. They are the words of people whose lives have been fundamentally and permanently changed. They had faced the terror of death in the darkness of the Telesterion, and they had emerged into the light with a new and liberating knowledge. The Eleusinian mysteries endured for nearly 2,000 years, a testament to their profound spiritual power. They survived the rise and fall of the Athenian Empire, the conquests of Alexander the Great, and the cultural and political dominance of Rome. They were finally extinguished in the late 4th century AD. The devoutly Christian Emperor Theodosius I, in his campaign to stamp out all pagan practices, issued a series of edicts that outlawed the ancient rituals. The final, physical destruction came in 396 AD, when Alaric the Goth and his invading army, some of whom were Arian Christians with a particular zeal for destroying pagan sites, swept through Greece. They sacked the ancient sanctuary at Eleusis, destroying the great Telesterion and scattering its stones. The sacred way fell into disuse. The sacred objects were lost forever. The silence that was once a holy vow, punishable by death, became the permanent, enforced silence of oblivion. And yet, the promise of Eleusis, the hope it offered, never truly died. The idea that there is more to life than what we see, that the soul endures beyond the grave, and that this truth can be experienced directly and personally, is a current that runs through all of Western mysticism. It is a whisper that we can still hear, if we listen closely, in the rustle of a field of grain under a silent, autumn sky. And so our journey along the sacred way comes to its conclusion. We have followed in the footsteps of ancient pilgrims, from the bustling heart of Athens, through the dust and revelry of the procession, and into the profound, silent darkness of the great initiation hall at Eleusis. We have sought to understand a mystery that was guarded by a vow of silence for nearly 2,000 years. We began our story with the grieving goddess, with the timeless, elemental myth of Demeter and Persephone. We saw how the violent abduction of the Maiden of Spring by Hades, the grim lord of the underworld, plunged the world into a barren, lifeless winter, a perfect and poignant reflection of a mother's inconsolable grief. We followed Demeter on her frantic, 9-day search, and we sat with her in disguise at the Maiden Well in Eleusis. We witnessed her divine anger and her ultimate, bittersweet reunion with her daughter, a reunion that established the very cycle of the Sesansa divine drama of loss, searching, and the eventual cyclical return of life and light. Then we joined the great procession and explored the sacred way. We saw how the public rites of the festival prepared the initiates, the Mysti, for the great secret to come. We followed the journey of the sacred objects, the Hiera, from their sanctuary to Athens and back again. We imagined the mass purification in the sea at Phaleron Bay, the sacrifices, and the joyous, 14-mile walk from Athens to Eleusis. We heard the echoes of the ritual jests at the Cephisos Bridge, a moment of cathartic laughter before the solemnity to come. And we saw the thousands of initiates arriving at the sanctuary at night, their torches a river of fire in the darkness, ready to drink the sacred Kykeon and face the final revelation. And finally, we stepped, in our imagination, into the vision in the darkness. We stood with the thousands of other seekers in the great, darkened hall of the Telesterion. We experienced the dramana, the dramatic reenactment of the sacred myth, a powerful performance of darkness and light, of sorrow and joy. We listened for the legomena, the whispered words of the Hierophant, explaining the deeper meaning of the soul's journey. And we contemplated the diknemena, the things shown in a sudden, brilliant blaze of fire. We considered the profound, life-altering vision that lay at the heart of the mysteries, perhaps the simple, yet staggeringly symbolic power of a single reaped ear of grain, or perhaps, as many have theorized, a genuine mystical experience, a vision of eternity induced by a psychoactive potion. We learned how this experience, whatever its true nature, fundamentally transformed the lives of its initiates, from the great philosopher Plato to the powerful emperor Marcus Aurelius. It gave them, as the Roman orator Cicero so eloquently put it, the power not only to live happily, but also to die with a better hope. The Eleusinian mysteries were the spiritual heart of the ancient Greek and Roman world for 2 millennia. In a world that often saw the afterlife as a bleak and shadowy realm of witless ghosts, Eleusis offered a radical and beautiful alternative. It offered a personal and profound answer to the most universal of human fears, the fear of death. It taught that, like the grain that falls into the dark earth only to be reborn in the glory of the spring, the human soul, too, would find its way back to the light. The great sanctuary was eventually destroyed by the invading Goths in 396 AD, and its ancient rites were forbidden by the Christian Emperor Theodosius I. The temple is now a ruin, its stones silent. The sacred objects are lost, and the exact nature of their final, ineffable vision remains a secret, protected forever by the vows of the past. But the hope they offered, the hope of a better life, and a better death, is a harvest that has never truly failed. It is a seed of wonder, a testament to the human search for meaning in the face of our own mortality. A seed that continues to be planted, in different forms, in the fertile soil of the human heart, in every philosophy, in every faith, and in every quiet moment of contemplation that seeks to understand the great mystery of existence. Thank you for joining me on this voyage with Driftwood Histories. If these stories have stirred your curiosity and soothed your mind, I invite you to subscribe and join our community of fellow travelers. There are many more hidden currents of time, many more secret histories, for us to explore together. Until then, sleep well. May your own journey be filled with meaning, and may your dreams be blessed with hope, and with the promise of a new dawn. Good night.